Well, folks, welcome to this week's episode of The Boundless Show. This is Lisa Anderson here with you. Always fun to join you for a weekly show, and this week is no exception. Okay, well, here we are for our roundtable, and we're going to have a conversation about revisiting our childhood in healthy ways. And so for some of us, maybe that's a little bit further back than others, but I think all of us tend to look back a little bit with rose-colored glasses on our childhoods. And so I have got Bailey, John, and Katie here. Hey, y'all.
Hey.
Hey, Lisa.
All right, good to have you. So John and I were talking a little bit about this the other day because we thought, there's a certain amount of, I feel like especially once people get post-college and you feel like you're out of that, like where your life has just been programmed your whole life and all of a sudden you're like having to make decisions, having to pay bills, having to do stuff. All of a sudden we just get like super old in our heads about like, remember. And I know it's funny because on social, I've seen it on Reels and elsewhere. A lot of places do these like flashbacks to certain decades, and then all of a sudden it's these products from when you were a kid and stuff. And I'm always like, oh, remember that? That was so great. Or that toy from when I was a kid. So that's kind of fun. Let's think about what are some of the favorite things that you remember from childhood, and, what causes you to start, like, what triggers, like, thinking about them or reminiscing or whatever?
Definitely thinking about my hometown, which is in South Carolina. I came from an all-boy family, so we shared the same room together, and we were kind of rough at times just because we loved to play rough. We had a trampoline, which was given to us by a family member, and thank God it had a net. So I love just reminiscing on some of those times, and times when I get together with my dad as well, because we had this thing that we would do with me and my brothers and my father. We would occasionally go out. We'd usually stop by a convenience store and get sodas, and we'd call it guys' night. Which Mom probably really appreciated because it gave her some breathing room since she homeschooled us. But those are some things that I look back on and think, wow, that was really some special stuff.
Yeah, that's good.
And the opposite of John, I grew up with all girls.
Okay.
My poor dad. So my cousin lived with us a lot of summers growing up. So I basically had 4 sisters. And we rode horses all the time. We lived on a farm, so we rode horses. We were always finding baby animals, playing hide and go seek. Jumping on the trampoline, playing Barbies. We would get coloring books and color and watch Disney movies. We just had so much fun and always loved reminiscing on all of that together. It was a blast.
Yeah, I grew up in a family of both girls and boys, so nice mix there.
Good balance.
Yes, good balance. I would say I was always way closer with the boys, so we would go outside, play in the mud all the time. I vividly remember like making like mud pies together and throwing them at each other. My mom got really mad because I was wearing nice clothes. She was like, "Why would you do that?" And also like playing outside. We loved playing outside together. We loved watching movies together. We loved coloring. Board games was a big thing in my house. We played Monopoly, and the game would last days and days and days, but it was so much fun.
It's so funny because like all of y'all are younger than I am, but none of you really mentioned a lot of technology or no one here is like wistful for the days of XYZ video games or hanging out on smartphones or doing YouTube videos or whatever, which I think is very telling because I think it kind of speaks to where we probably are going in this conversation a little bit and the importance of, the things that matter. I think for me, one thing that it very much stands out is the feeling that whether or not this was true, I feel like this was true, things just felt a little safer back then. Like I remember walking to school and it wasn't a big deal. I remember, obviously there was kind of those, PSAs on TV about stranger danger and, you have to be careful and McGruff the crime dog and all this. But you never felt like it was constantly some crazy, like where now parents are driving their kids everywhere to even like a door-to-door scenario because the fear, of public safety is so big. And that's a sadness and a loss, I think, for a lot of us. Yeah, that's hard. Okay, so how much, in light of that and what you're thinking about there, how much do you struggle with wanting to kind of go back and the longing of, how it was or what you remember, the memories, the feeling like days were so much longer and stuff was so much more fun and so much more easy. How, like, what causes that? How do you think about that in that sense of nostalgia?
I think it's happened for me a lot recently because, now I live here by myself and, I used to be with my sisters all the time. Like even in college, my sister lived across the parking lot from me. So I think it's just that nostalgia of like missing being with them all the time. And even my cousin, when she would live with us, like having her there all the time. Now we see her every couple of years. So I think it's when I think back on those times of how we were just all together all the time. And yeah, we didn't have anything to do except play and have fun. It's when I miss it the most.
Yeah. John, you actually recently saw a movie that I want you to talk about that really
Christopher Robin.
had
Oh
an
my
impact on you.
gosh.
Yeah.
It did, because it's such a simple movie, but the thing that really impacted me is I grew up watching Winnie the Pooh and other cartoon characters, but one of the things that's so touching about that film, and I'll try not to give too much of it away, there's one scene where he finds a balloon in a busy market, and he finds so much joy in just this little balloon. And I thought, wow, that really kind of explains the heart of a child in a really neat way, because kids can find joy in just the simplest things. And when I saw that, it just really reminded me, man, how much have I been taking the time to just enjoy the simple gifts, even if it's walking into the grocery store and smelling the flowers, even if it is going to a restaurant and tasting new food that I haven't tried. When was the last time I did that? And so it really kind of caused me to pause and say, maybe I should do more of that.
Yeah. It seems like we were much more in the moment. Like there wasn't this, like now we're always wishing away the present in the sense of like, oh, I can't wait for the weekend, or I can't wait for my vacation, or I can't, because it's all about like, I remember as a kid, I didn't worry about my health or getting sunburned or money, budgets, whatever. In fact, I was just thinking, the way I thought of it is, this was a couple of months ago now, but I was riding with someone and noticed that like they were a little bit of a crazy driver. And I was just like tense the whole time and thinking to myself how we would do road trips. And I would, like when I was small, would sometimes just curl up like on the floor of the back seat, and sleep. And then as I got older, then I would try to like lay flat across the back seat and, stretch your seatbelt over. So technically you still had your seatbelt on, but you could still kind of cop it out. But just thinking of like, yeah, I didn't have to be forward thinking or worry about stuff. And so that your whole, like a section of your day can be consumed by a balloon, because that's all you have to worry about. So that's cool. I don't know. What about the nostalgia for you two?
Oh, Disney Plus has definitely helped this a lot.
Yeah.
Just because, like, I remember when it first came out, I remember being like, oh my gosh, all these movies that I used to watch when I was a kid. And, like, I was scrolling through and I was like, oh, I totally forgot that movie existed. And, like, I turned it on. I think it was like Cinderella 3, which is like really specific. But I turned it on and I still remembered almost everything word for word. Like I remember like it just like all came like flooding back. And so whenever I watch something or like see something from like my childhood, like a TV show or a movie, it just like brings all these like really good memories back, because, my family used to watch a lot of movies together or TV or things like that. And so it just brings so many memories back.
Well, that's a good springboard, because obviously, as Bailey and John shared, and then now you, Katie, with things that you kind of revisit and things you like to go back to, what are some more of those things? Like, what are the, specifically some of the things that make you feel like a kid again? And do you kind of go after them, and do they end up disappointing you? Or can you pretty much reclaim childhood with a few fun things? What does that look like?
Yeah, well, swimming was a huge part of my childhood because all my sisters and I swim. So for me, whenever I go back to a swim meet, it like transports me back, like watching my sister swim. And it is kind of sad, like watching the races and being like, oh, I'm not racing. But I'm actually planning on joining a master's swim team, which is for people 18 and over. So maybe that is chasing that childhood piece. But that's one thing. And yeah, just going back to my hometown just brings back all these memories, you know, because you drive by places and you're like, oh, remember when we did this or when we went here? And just certain movies, like Katie said, Scooby-Doo, Barbie, Heartland.
All the Barbie movies.
Yes. Whenever those play, it reminds me of family movie nights we would have too, and it's fun.
Yeah, that's great.
Definitely staying in touch with my two younger brothers. Technology goes a very long way in being able to just communicate with each other, and because we have things like Apple Music and Spotify, we'll sometimes even send each other songs and say, hey, here's what I'm listening to. And it may be a song that we really liked 10, 15 years ago, but sometimes music, I think, has a way of getting better with time. So me and my brother Jared will do this a lot. We'll send each other songs just in the middle of the day, and usually we will even include a lot of things like fire emojis. It's like, dude, have you listened to this song yet? And so we have a great time doing that. But that has a way of kind of transporting me back to the times when we were just listening to music on CD players. We weren't listening on streaming services because they didn't exist yet. So that's really a fun way to kind of keep in touch with my brothers now, and also just remembering what it was like back then.
That's good.
Yeah. Well, I was telling these guys earlier that the other day I made pancakes for dinner because like that was like one of my favorite breakfast foods as a kid, and me and my roommate just looked at each other, and I was just like, you know what? We should just make pancakes. Like that just sounds so good right now, and it just kind of, I don't know, it brought me back. That was like one of my favorite meals. So, and like last night I made tacos for dinner, which was like one of my favorite meals as a kid. My mom's from Costa Rica, so she taught me how to make homemade tortillas. So I made homemade tortillas and like made it exactly like how she would have made it when I was younger. And so just little things like that. And like I said, watching the same movies and TV shows, I go back to them and I'm just like transported back to when I was like 8 or 9 years old.
Yeah, I was thinking there were a couple things that came to mind for me. One is anything that relates to like camp, like going, like I went to camp as a kid, but then we also did like during the summer, there would be just like church, like Sunday evenings at a nearby camp where they'd have the service at the camp. And even just certain elements of like things that I might smell will remind me of that. And another thing I associate with camp is grape soda. So sometimes I will just like, I never go to the store and buy grape soda because, hello, now I'm obligatorily worried about my health. But if I'm ever outside or in any kind of camp context and there's like a vending machine or a canteen or snack shack that has grape soda, yeah, that's going to have to be purchased just for the sake of nostalgia. So that's kind of a good example of that. The other one is that I thought, because it just came up the other day, was a friend of mine, their kid had checked out a book from the library, and I went all crazy because I remembered it from when I was a kid, and I'm like, let me tell you about this book, which of course their kid did not even care about my opinion of the book, but I was just all like caught up in it and like, that book is so great, and blah, blah, blah. So that was kind of a fun memory to have in the middle of that. But okay, well, does it look like, do you feel like there are any things, I should say, that, you know, again, we look back on our childhoods and we think, oh, they're so great. I mean, are there any ways that you've kind of gone back to your childhood or thought of things and been disappointed? Like in any kind of, for me, I was just talking to my sister yesterday about wanting to return to the place that I grew up, which I actually haven't been to in a while, but I'm a little fearful that it won't be as I remember it, you know? So there's an element of like, oh, do I want to be disappointed? Or like the houses will have gotten older and it'll seem smaller probably. So I don't know. What about you guys?
Yeah. Well, for me, I actually went back to my hometown like 2.5 years ago. It's like Christmas of 2020. And I went back for 2 weeks-ish, and I was determined I was going to go back to every single place, like the house where I grew up and the church that I went to and the restaurants that I loved as a kid. And for the most part, it was actually really nice to be back. But I remember being like so disappointed because the church that I grew up in, like it was a church that my dad planted, and I grew up there for 14 years of my life, which was a majority of my life. And it was closed down. Like the people who took it over, it was just gone. Like it was just an empty building. And it was so sad to see. Like I had made so many good memories there and so many friends, and my school was run out of that church too that I went to. And I peeked into one of the windows and I could still see like like someone had written something on the board, and it was something that was written my last day of my senior year on the board, and it was still up.
Oh my word.
And that was just crushing.
That's like a movie in the
yeah,
making.
literally.
So
Yeah, it was
sad.
like so crushing, and I remember being so disappointed that
Yeah.
this huge part of my childhood just kind of died.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah, kind of along that same vein. So when I was a swimmer, the Cortez team was the Cortez Leopard Sharks, and it was just like such an epic name, and we had such a fun team. Like we
In
all
a
became,
landlocked state.
yeah, we
That's okay.
became like such a big family. Like I got brothers, from that team that I'd never had brothers, so it was fun, and we were up at 5 a.m. every morning swimming and just formed these amazing bonds. But the team doesn't exist anymore. When I graduated, it just kind of dissolved and a new team started, and so that's really sad. Like going to swim meets and that team doesn't even exist anymore. So that is really hard sometimes.
Which is crazy because you're talking about it, Bailey, like you're someone's grandma, like going back 50 years later. I mean, the fact that things can change so fast.
Yeah.
I mean, that's where it is like, it's sad because you're like, man, I was just there. Like, this was just my experience. Like,
there were just 50 kids
not-
swimming. Yeah.
yeah, that's wild. I don't know.
I was very blessed to have a great childhood in that a lot of the moments when I was living in them were very rich. And I think now when I really look back on them, I see just how rich some of those times were. If I had to do it over again, there isn't a lot I would change, even the mistakes I made, just because of the lessons that God taught me even through some of those. But I would probably just stop and enjoy the moment more. I wouldn't think so much about the future. Even as a middle school, high school kid, I was constantly thinking about the future. And I look back on some of the relationships I had then that I don't really have now, except through occasionally seeing their posts on social media. And I would just sit down and enjoy conversations more. And I feel like college helped me to do that a little bit better. But it really is just... It's about taking the season of life God has given you and enjoying the relationships you have here and now.
Yeah, that's good. So kind of in that vein, John, as we finish up here, I'd love to get your ideas, like for that person who's just discouraged about, being a 20-something or maybe a 30-something and adulting and just feeling like, yeah, it's just not the way it used to be. What would be your ideas for recapturing fun, even as an adult, or being that person who doesn't totally live in the past? Again, to Katie's story, I just saw a story the other day on social media about my favorite amusement park growing up is shutting down. It's being bought out and made into a big development and stuff. And I'm like, and there goes more memories. So maybe I do need to go back to where I grew up in order to recapture that before it's bulldozed. But what would be, what would be your encouragement to folks who are just like, well, I don't want to be just sad all the time or wishing for what was. Yeah. What does that look like for you to be hopeful in that?
I feel like I'm kind of working through that right now because, students are starting back at Liberty. And so my sister and I were texting about that today, like, wow, we really don't miss the classes, but, we really miss the relationships and our friends and just living so close to so many people our age and everything like that. But one thing I found that helps me when I'm kind of dwelling on the past is just to make time for fun here and now. Like watch a movie that you loved, like call your family or call your friends, like take a day off. I sometimes work on Saturday and Sunday writing. Just take a day off and relax, like do something fun. Like you can have fun now. It may look different than it did when you were a kid, but you can still do it.
Two things that have really helped me. You brought up Christopher Robin earlier. I'd encourage everybody to watch it. It's wonderful.
Fantastic film.
Yes.
It sounds like a big tearjerker,
cute.
John. I don't know
Oh
about this.
my
I'm
gosh.
It's worth it though.
It's so
Okay.
awesome.
Okay.
Another idea that I wrote down was sometimes if you just go out on a walk and maybe you aren't at the age where you have kids yet, maybe you just go to a playground and watch the children play. Because it's amazing to see how kids just live life with such a carefree spirit. They're constantly dreaming. I think there's something really special about God's heart that comes out in the heart of a child. And they just have a dependence on people and on God and really just enjoying the world that I think a lot of adults need to learn from, myself included. And maybe just go to a playground and just sit and observe. It's amazing what you'll come away with and how rich life can become when you just try to see life through a child's eyes again.
That's cool.
I would say find ways to act like a child. Like, not like, be annoying and be like, are we there yet? Don't do that. But I would say find opportunities for those fun things that you did when you were a kid. Like, I remember on vacation when I was younger, we would go mini golfing. So every once in a while, I want to get a group together and go mini golfing. Or like one of the ways that my sister and I bonded is she would take me to the movies. And so I find opportunities to go to the movies. Or like I said, like cook a meal that you loved when you were a kid. Like make a 99-cent Kraft mac and cheese. Like do something, like find opportunities to do that. Because you can take 20 minutes out of your day to watch an episode of an old TV show that you loved when you were a kid. So I think that really can help you, recapture that spirit and give you a little more joy in your life.
Yeah, that's great. I was actually watching a movie the other day with a friend of mine, and she pulls out one of those fun dips, like the Kool-Aid with the sticks. And I'm like, hello, 1987, what is going on here? Like what? So that was just really weird, to think of that and do. But as you were talking, as all of you were saying this, two things that came to mind for me, because I had another friend talk to me about this in terms of health stuff, but one thing adults never do is take their shoes off and walk on the grass. So to do that, especially in the summer, so many adults don't think to do that. When
It's
you're
so
in a
fun.
park and you just go barefoot in the grass, and a lot of people will say it's called grounding now, and it's supposed to be have a lot of health benefits, but don't think about the health benefits. Just do it for fun. And then find a playground and just swing for a while. I think that's another fun thing to do. Is
so
just
fun.
one of those old school playgrounds or park playgrounds
I
or
did
whatever.
that the
and
other
just-
day, and it was so nice.
Yeah, I think that's a lot of fun to be able to do. And of course, grab a friend and encourage one another, and maybe reminisce about each other's childhoods too, and what are some of the fun things, and then come up with a list and start reclaiming some of these with people. So good thoughts, you guys. This is fun.
This is awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thanks, Lisa.
The Boundless Show is a production of Boundless.org. Focus on the family.